Greetings, welcome to session 3 of our series on existential psychology. Today we're talking about authenticity, for better or for worse. Carl Rogers proposed the idea of authenticity in writing, sure, most famously in the Gloria tape. So you can find that around here somewhere. It's on the YouTube if you have access to that. Trainees in psychology have probably seen it. In the Gloria tape, when he's introducing what he's going to do, he proposes that he'll be at his most effective when he is all in one piece on the inside. That is, his thoughts, his emotions, his words, and his speech will all agree. And that is what we'd refer to as authenticity. We could define it that way. People ultimately can do just three things. People can think, feel, and act. You throw in speech as that subset of action, and that's where Rogers is pointing. Authenticity means, again, the emotions, the thoughts, the speech, and the behavior all are in agreement. They agree. When one or more of these components disagree, the person has become incongruent. Think of a person yelling, "I'm not angry," while flipping over tables, right? Their behavior and their speech don't match up, they disagree. A regular person on a regular day is probably incongruent, probably a lot of the time. It might go largely unnoticed, it might not be very important, but for a therapist, this can cause problems. Now, Rogers wanted to be authentic. Virginia Satir comes along a bit later and worries this is if this is enough. One might, after all, be authentically a racist. That is, one could feel the emotion of hate towards someone because of their apparent membership in a racial group. One might think that person inferior. One might insult that other in public. And one might even avoid or aggress people from that minority group. This would be perfectly authentic because the feeling and the thought and the words and the behavior are all in perfect alignment. Um, so Virginia Satir adds two more dimensions, right? And these domains are outside the self. They are that the actions must be appropriate to the environment and they must be respectful of the rights of others, giving us six domains of congruence. This, incidentally, is why I don't teach in K through 12 settings. My speech is not appropriate for children, and limiting my speech to what is permissible and respectful for K through 12 environments might limit my ability to tell the truth, to say things that are true. The next idea is meta communication. This is Satir's idea. Meta communication occurs when those domains disagree, like the person angrily flipping tables and yelling, "I'm not angry." There's a thought that doesn't match an action, for example. Someone saying they're not a racist while doing a racist thing. The person then communicates something that they did not intend, some kind of mixed message, a contradiction, some apparent hypocrisy. Little Sally hits little Johnny. Mother grabs Sally by the wrist, says, "Sally, don't hit," and then hits her. This is a classic metacommunication. What is Sally to learn from this engagement? It's obviously not "don't hit." Mother cannot mean "don't hit" because she hit. So Sally might instead learn mother's a hypocrite and not to be trusted. It's okay to hit if you're bigger. It's good to be the king. It's okay to hit girls but not boys. And most devastating, people deserve protection, but Sally does not. Sally's therefore not a real person. And this lesson is shame. How much shame did you develop in childhood because your parents treated you inconsistently with their stated values? I grew up learning to say please and thank you, to have good manners for a young man of my age. My parents never used such courtesies with me, indicating courtesies are about deference to authority rather than respect. They told me not to smoke cigarettes, and both smoked cigarettes. My father ultimately died of a treatable cancer, and my mother's not dead yet, but she is on her way from emphysema. My father said he loved me, but he let himself die of cancer. We can spend lifetimes sorting out the ways that our parents were inconsistent, trying to reconcile things that just really aren't reconcilable. Let's get our dogs in a row. Every year, sledders race dogs across Alaska in the Iditarod race. Dogs are tied into place, each to the other, highly trained, well organized. They're ordered, commanded to go in one direction. And they all pull that way. A person might be filled with all sorts of conflicts. Maybe I'm reminded of death today. I mean, come on, man. I drive a hearse. My daily driver's a hearse. And like half my t-shirts are like goth crap like this. Come on. A regular person is reminded of death in a given day. And reminded of death, perhaps the person feels anxious or angsty, but that anxiety is not really acceptable. That reminder is not acceptable. It puts things out of our control that we can't live with having outside of our control. Humans need to feel competent and safe, and so that anxiety gets buried, detached from consciousness. But it doesn't go away. It doesn't stop affecting the the body, right? That's a conflict. Maybe I've been taught in academics to write men and women, or he or she, or his or hers, in order to be inclusive of both genders. But society changes. And now enough people don't like gender language, and there's enough, controversy about the idea of two genders that the rules change. In APA 7, we're supposed to write they instead of he or she, they instead of his or hers, theirs. It's inclusive. And once we get used to it, actually, it takes gender out of places it doesn't really belong. My words, when I write he or she, my words accord with what I feel and think, but they're not respectful of others or appropriate to the setting of an academic journal. And, for certainly the last 10 years or so, the more that I think about it, the more my thoughts change on the issue. Actually, I became recently an advocate for the they. Um, what if you want two things? What if you want to respect tradition, but also to be kind to others? My son's a martial artist, he does Taekwondo. And when team members have birthdays, it's traditional for every member of the Taekwondo team to punch them on the arm. And they get punched on the arm until they've been punched as many times as they have years on their age. Children and young adults are expected to submit to this tradition. A lot of social pressure is present for both the victims and the bullies to play their parts. hazing on military sites, college campuses, uh, West Point, Hell Week, and the third years have absolute authority, and hazing goes on all the way up to sex crimes. More simply, people might just be of two minds. Maybe you want to finish your doctorate, but every day you don't apply for a program. Uh, God, I have so many friends out there who are ABD, man, all but dissertation. It's easier and more fun to scroll your social media, your WhatsApp or your Facebook. You should, but you don't want to. You do want to, but you don't want to. If you wanted to, you would be doing the thing, right? But it's hard. The dogs are pulling in different directions, right? Nobody wins Iditarod with dogs that can't all run in the same way. So, what we're talking about now is purity or singularity, at least, of intention. Do you even know how you feel? What if you knew? What if you It would take a certain amount of self-honesty to really know that. But what if you could manage it? Set aside defensiveness, set aside ego, and just accept what arises in your body. And knowing what you felt, what if you could know what you thought? Do the feelings align with the thoughts? If not, what does that mean? What if you think you love children, but whenever you're near children, you're really angry? Yeah, some self honesty is necessary here. People studying existential psychology are usually good at saying accompany, accompany. We all read The Cry for Myth, in which Rollo May uses Faust as a model for therapy. The client descends into hell, and the therapist accompanies, providing empathy and a sounding board, a listening ear. Right, they're the disinterested stranger. Um, but the same people who can easily say the job of the therapist is to accompany complain of feeling powerless. Right? The client is in distress, and there's nothing I can do about that. What's the use of a therapy that can't offer comfort or solve any problems or even meaningfully give advice? Well, is a problem of a divided mind. Therapists, of course, want to help our clients. It would be weird to study and train to become a therapist just to sit idly by while people suffer. We have to believe that something good comes of sitting in the room with people in distress. We need to consider outcomes to have some empirical measure of help. But helping isn't helping. Just to take the case of advice, advice leads to three possible outcomes, each worse than the last. Number one is, usually clients just ignore advice anyway. And then we're wasting our breath and we're wasting our time, and it breeds resentment and whatever. Number two, sometimes clients take our advice and things get worse, and then we get the blame. But worst of all is when the client takes our advice and things get better and we get the credit. Now we've created a dependent. Imagine if we could solve all our clients' problems for them. Imagine we could nullify their grief or make their hard choices. All of this would be a kind of murder. We're robbing the person of their agency, which is the core of their selfhood. Existential therapy is about letting go of attachment to outcome. The client might stand or fall, fail or succeed. They might make brave or cowardly choices, and that's not up to us. It's not to do with us. We just follow them, reflect them to their selves, offer a non judgmental holding space where they can try on different ways of being, and then we trust those clients to do what is best for them. Feeling powerless is an important step in letting go of that need to do something. I was at a conference in Hong Kong 2016, and Todd Dubose did a therapy demonstration with a volunteer. Uh, Attendees talked about it, young Chinese therapists for the most part. And us Westerners and graybeards, we kind of sat back and let everyone have the time. It was winding down. Everyone had their say. I jumped in and I said, Todd, that's the most boring thing I've ever seen. And Todd, maybe sensing some playfulness, uh, invited me to go on, and I did. I said, well, this was just two people sitting together, talking about how they feel with nobody trying to do anything to anyone. No goals, no coercion, no drama. It's so boring. It's so boring, right? Great therapy is boring. Great therapy makes terrible television. In the moment, right? Therapy's not boring when you're the one doing the therapy. In the moment, we're engaged. We're attuned to the client. We're giving all of our presence effortlessly. But from outside, nothing appears to be happening. It's like watching grass grow or paint dry. We should care about our clients. We should care that they get better. At the same time, we have to trust that they are the best agent for their own betterment. The one who knows their life and circumstances and has to live with the consequences of their choices. Helping isn't helping. Detachment from specific outcomes is the most helpful stance that we can take. Paradoxically, the more that we care about our people, the more that we have to just witness, accompany, and become powerless. That's a very powerful stance. At the end of his life, Rollo May let go of humanistic psychology, espousing an existentialism that would be complete in itself. At the time, that wasn't really possible. Existentialism was not complete, but we've spent 30 years or so since then rounding out existentialism such that in modernity it really can stand alone as its own independent set of practices. Choosing to practice as an existentialist is choosing to let go of all the interventions, the language, and the techniques that we learned in other settings. No transference, no ids, egos, and superegos, no neurons and brain regions and lobes, and no coping skills and anxiety reduction exercises. Those things are good. If you have the intentions, those were designed to enact. But each of them in its way leads away from the core goal of agency. And they lead ultimately away from authenticity. By 2000, in the US, most newly licensing therapists identified as eclectic. When asked what that means, they'd say, I do what makes sense in the moment. Imagine you go over to someone's house and their style is eclectic, which means they have a couch that's Rococo and a bureau that's Edwardian and a painting that's modern and an end table that's bohemian, right? They just like each thing, but they don't go together. By 2003, though, the science of therapy was pointing away from eclecticism. I'm talking here about Norcross in, God, Norcross was about 2001. Barry Duncan in about 2003, right? These studies, these meta-analyses, they're pointing us away. Um, what makes people better seems not to be the kind of therapy they're getting. It seems to be a bunch of client factors like their own optimism, their own severity of problems, and therapy factors like how good is the therapist at forging and maintaining relationships, and how good is the person at what they do. Not what they do, but whether they're a master of what they do. Each therapy has different goals. So using CBT techniques in psychoanalysis would be incompatible. CBT is about symptom reduction, and psychoanalysis is about insight or personal awareness. And you can't use CBT, which is designed to destroy feelings, to get awareness about feelings, the origins of feelings. This is the power of pure intention. It's about knowing what you're doing and why. It applies to therapy, it applies to life. And it's too simple. It's too simple. People might have multiple authenticities. We're full of conflict. A person might authentically believe two things. In America, it can be risky to be gay, especially in some parts of the country that are more conservative. Advocates sometimes say the only way to be authentic is to be open and come out, but that's a decision ultimately best left to the person. I dream of an America where that makes sense, and it's possible and it's safe, and we're not quite there. The person might authentically want to live openly as their real self, but also have equally real concerns about their safety. And making a choice one way or the other does not make that person inauthentic. It means they have to choose between one thing and the other. The person might love their family, and coming out might damage their parents' business or political relationships. It's authentic to want to be real, and it's authentic to want to protect your family. There's no inauthenticity here. And, dude, not on the bus, man. Uh, One of the dangers of a really good course of existential therapy is it's really good. It's really good. We forge these like deep, loving relationships with people, and we might be the only person in that client's life who seems to see them, to care about them at this level, to have time for them, listen, try to understand. Clients sometimes grow quite dissatisfied with their other relationships. Like, why can't my marriage be like this? Well, the therapeutic relationship is special. It has these clear, bright lines drawn around it, boundaries, right? We give, the therapist gives in therapy and does not take. There isn't, for example, romance or sex or the threat thereof. We're not competing with our client in business or trading favors. Other relationships always have elements of risk or danger that aren't there in therapy. If my client insults me today, I forgive her tomorrow. Honestly, I probably don't take offense in the first place. It's grist for the mill, and I'm going to find out more about it. But if my wife insults me today, maybe I spend some time thinking about the nature of our relationship. For the client, the healing, holding power of the therapeutic relationship can seem like a utopia that they could recreate in the rest of their lives. And that isn't realistic or even really desirable. And for us, it's also possible that the therapist, having become the therapist rather than just learning how to do therapy, becomes the therapist always. Our own relationships can become one sided, with us doing all of the giving, all of the holding, and all of the listening. We can dissolve, lose our intentions, our ambitions, become pure empathic sponges. The way that we talk with people in therapy is not appropriate for other settings. When the bank teller seems to be having a bad day, we need to conclude our business and move on. We can't stand at the window and accompany that bank teller through all of their troubles. A person on a bus spewing hate perhaps deserves empathy and consideration, but it's not up to us necessarily to provide it in that setting. A personal code of honesty is fine, except when we're surrounded by others who will not live up to that personal code of honesty or who will take advantage of us. Not on the bus, man. And here's a little note on reification. Reification means to treat abstractions as though they were real things in the universe with definite properties. Show me two, right? You can't. You can show me a symbol for two, you can draw the number two on a piece of paper, you could show me two of something, but you can't show me two because two's not a thing. It's not a thing in the world. Two does not exist. Intelligence is not a property that people possess, much less a thing in itself. There's no such thing as personality. There is no mental illness. These are all just categories. And there's no such thing as authenticity. We have a word to mean a concept, so we can talk about what happens to us in therapy, how we can try to be of service to each other. But authenticity isn't real. Don't take it too seriously. To quote Todd Dubose, life is always meaningful. We just don't always like the meaning. In the same way, people are always authentic. Right? We experience multiple demands and we look after ourselves in the face of those demands in whatever way we can. People are always authentically themselves. There's nothing else we could be. And authenticity is not a goal. Certainly not for clients. It's just a thing that maybe happens sometimes. In contemplating the idea of authenticity, I hope that you come to a greater understanding of yourself, of your goals, of your inner conflicts, and of how you are in the therapy room. As usual, I'm throwing mud in the water on purpose because even more central than authenticity to existentialism is paradox and ambiguity. Clients sometimes might leave therapy identifiably more authentic than when they started. They might be clearer. They might understand themselves better. They might lie less, but that's not a goal. The goal, such as I have any, is that they have decided for themselves how to be, including perhaps how authentic to be, how authentic they can afford to be, and with whom. It just might not be good for people to be honest, risk-taking, vulnerable human beings. They might be in settings where that means submitting to exploitation. And that's it for authenticity. Thanks for dropping by.